I have a question here. Can I ask about a particular part of your video? You mentioned that the spiritual path is about three things, namely resolving psychology. And that's really it. I just feel like there has to be a positive aspect to spiritual growth as well, a creative aspect, a connected aspect. When I'm so focused on psychology, I almost feel dead inside. When I'm focused on the positive and uplifting aspect of spirituality, I naturally gain insights to my psychology, but I also feel the tremendous love, peace, and joy that makes life worth living. From that state, the psychology naturally reveals itself. I'm not sure if I'm over-intellectualizing what you're saying. It's just been an enigma for me since following your teachings. So, I understand this question because for the first many years I was on the path. Well, for the first years I was on the path, I didn't understand the need to resolve psychology. But back in the early 1990s, I switched and I realized I need to look at my psychology. And I went into different forms of therapy and went through a period where I was really focused on the psychology. And I always had that hope that one day I'll be done with it. I'll have resolved my psychology. And then everything will be wonderful and everything will be at peace. And I had some periods where I felt that way, but then I was back into looking at psychology and struggling with the psychology. But really, the question I came to ask myself at a certain point is that, is resolving psychology really a struggle? Does it have to be a struggle? And I understand where the question is coming from, because as I said, I felt that way in the beginning. It was like, oh yeah, there's another thing I have to work on in my psychology. It's a drag. It's tough. I'd rather avoid it, but I have to do it. So I force myself to do it. And it's understandable that we feel that way at a certain level of the path, but it doesn't have to feel that way. There can come a point where we have, and I'm not saying it's something you can just switch your mind, but there comes a point where you've resolved enough of these subconscious selves that I always talk about, that all of a sudden you make a switch where you realize it's not a drag to resolve psychology, it's actually joyful to resolve its psychology. It doesn't require struggle. It's not something you have to force yourself to do. And, like the question says, when I'm so focused on psychology, I almost feel dead inside. Yeah, but what is it that feels dead? It's the subconscious self that feels dead. The conscious you doesn't feel dead. But the subconscious self does because it doesn't want to be exposed. So it's resisting you. It's trying to, the ego, the subconscious selves are trying to create this association that working on psychology, it's like a terrible thing. It makes you feel dead. It's unpleasant. It's painful. Because I want to scare you away from doing it. Because it leads to their death. So the question is saying, when I'm focused on the positive and uplifting aspect of spirituality, I naturally gain insights to my psychology. Yeah, but that's what happens after you make the switch. Where you accept that resolving psychology is really what it's all about, and there's no problem with it. It's not unpleasant. It leads to greater freedom. I mean, after I made the switch, which was a long time ago, it's just like I don't dread seeing something in my psychology, because I know it leads, when I see it and resolve it, it leads to greater freedom. So what's the drag? It's just, okay, let's get over this too and feel more free. So you can come to a point where you're constantly feeling that spirituality is a positive thing, but you are not denying that there's still psychology to resolve. And see, that is why I have been saying in some of my videos, you have to look at everything in context. What I've been saying is that I have met so many people on these 48 years on the spiritual path who haven't grasped that the central aspect of the path is to resolve psychology. Because we all want to get into a positive state of mind, but what keeps us out of the positive state of mind is unresolved psychology. And we only resolve psychology by looking at it. And so when we have resolved enough psychology, we are generally in a peaceful and uplifting state of mind. And we are naturally focused on, when I'm focused on the positive and uplifting aspects of spirituality, but that's what I'm saying, there comes a point where every aspect of spirituality is positive and uplifting because your life experience is positive and uplifting. You're not in a deficit mode anymore. But in order to get to that point, you have to resolve some of these subconscious selves that are always projecting this deficit. And when you do that, hey, what's not positive? Right? I mean, I understand it, the question. I can look back at myself and can say I had a point where I would have this contrast between, oh, now I'm focused on the positive, and now I'm feeling very spiritual, and oh, now I have to resolve some psychology, But as I'm saying, the further I've gone along on the path, that contrast has disappeared. It doesn't matter anymore. It's like at the background level, I'm in what you would call a positive and uplifting state of mind. I prefer to call it a neutral state of mind. But, and things come up, and they create a ripple, and I deal with it, and then I'm back to flowing with the river. It's like I'm constantly flowing with what the Ascended Masters call the river of life, and this is my background state of mind. And sometimes there's some whirlpools in the river, and sometimes there's some rocks on the side, and I have to deal with. But then it passes, and then I'm again flowing with the river. And but you only get to that point by resolving the psychology that causes you to hold on to something. And I fully understand that up until a certain point, looking at that psychology feels painful. It feels tough. It's unpleasant. But as I said, you can come to a point where you realize this is just the ego or the subconscious selves that are projecting this at you so that they can try to scare you away from looking at them. Because that's the only way they can survive, is to prevent you from looking at them. Seeing, as I've said in several of my videos, this is just a self. It's not me. It's not who I am. I am the conscious you. I am neutral awareness. That's why I can flow with the river of life. I'm just observing. I'm not holding on to anything. But this particular self is holding on to something, and it's preventing me from flowing. But if I don't look at it, I'll continue to hold on. But if I look at it and resolve it, I can then flow again. And so, as I'm saying, it's just a matter of resolving enough psychology that you make this shift where you see that there is no really contradiction between resolving psychology and having a, whatever you want to call it, positive or uplifting experience. To me, it's more of a neutral experience, but it is a positive and uplifting experience. It's just not in the human sense, that's contrasted with unhappiness.